Hi, I'm Perry Atkinson, General Manager here at theDove. Hey, check out our other videos and check out our website at theDove.us. Okay, welcome back. And of course, you know, our legislature is in session in Oregon, up in Salem. We're delighted to have back with us today Scott Jorgensen. He's a legislative staffer, author, and also a former reporter, so he gets what we're doing here. How you doing, Scott?
Good. Eager to start the week.
Here you go. Well, a couple things, and we only got a few moments. Tell us about the new Secretary of State.
So a lot of people were expecting a sitting legislator to be appointed to that position. But instead, her name's Jeannie Adkins. She's very low profile. She had actually just retired. She'd been a staffer working for U.S. Senator Jeff Merkley. And what this does, she has no interest in running for the position again in a couple of years. So she's going to be a caretaker and just do the job for a couple of years. And that means that you're going to have an open seat for Secretary of State. And that's huge because there are a lot of Democrats who want it, some Republicans that want it, but that means that that race is going to be much more competitive than it would have been otherwise with somebody running with the advantage of incumbency. Well, now we know how important that seat is because that's second to the throne, so to speak. But I understand she's kind of interesting. She does have a Planned Parenthood background and a Department of Human Services background. Yeah, that's correct. And, you know, she's been a long-time Democratic staffer. I think she had worked for Senator Merkley when he was here in the legislature as well. But, you know, once again, somebody who's very low-key. The adage I heard about making those kinds of appointments is that if you appoint a sitting legislator to that kind of position, you make one friend and 5 enemies. So that was one of the dynamics in place there. The other thing is that if Governor Brown had appointed a sitting legislator to that position in the middle of a session, then that person's constituents would have been unrepresented, which would have been unfair to them. And then you have a whole process at the local level where the county party people get together and go through the different applicants and do interviews, and that process takes several weeks. So in a lot of ways, this is actually a really good move on the governor's part, and it creates an opportunity for Republicans that might not have been there otherwise. Hey, Scott, is the governor engaged? Do you see her in the building? Is she working the hallways? Yes, and you know, she was a longtime legislator, so she has a lot of these relationships that she's built over time. And in fact, I think my boss just met with her last week to discuss some issues. So she's around, I mean, more so than Kulongoski was in the 2005 session. We couldn't find that guy anywhere back then. Let's take a look at a couple of bills quickly here before we run out of time. Senate Bill 321, the compulsory school age from 7 to 5. Tell us about that. We've gotten a lot of pushback about that. That's part of this early learning initiative that former Governor Kitzhaber was pushing, that Governor Brown has indicated she still supports. And that's been a huge issue because, as you know, we have the nation's worst graduation rate. And that's come up. Education funding, the Ways and Means Committee met on Thursday to discuss that. And the budget that's been proposed for that is $7.2 million. And a lot of the districts all over the state feel that that isn't adequate, and Senate Republicans have agreed with them on that. There's this really great article that came out in the Willamette Week by Nigel Jacobs, and it talked about how Kitzhaber was prepared to take on the teachers' unions because of what he calls the disconnect. And this is huge because a lot of people in the building have known about this for a while, that at the state level, you see the education funding go up and up and up, but at the local level, all there is cuts. And that article explains why there's that dynamic, because at the state level, the teachers union is and has been one of the most powerful political entities in the state. And so your local school boards and local school districts are severely outmatched when it comes to bargaining, and they're forced to make promises at the local level that then have to be matched at the state level. And so disconnect's the big word there. So that's one of the things that's coming into play here. Somewhat on the same vein of education, Common Core, very, very controversial, not only in Oregon, but across the country. And let's see, Grants Pass Representative Carl Wilson now has a bill that would give the school districts the option, one way or the other. Well, and we've also seen some pushback on that from the teachers' unions. That had come up during committee days during the interim because they, between sessions, They still have committee meetings every couple of weeks. And the teachers union was expressing some opposition to Common Core and said, if this testing goes through as it's planned, most of our kids are going to fail and we're going to look really bad. And so are our members. And Carl's gotten some pushback on his bill because there's still some funding attached to all of that. And I was reading some article the other day that said at this point that Bill Gates has invested, tens of billions of dollars in Common Core, but the bottom line is he's going to get it all back one way or the other, based on some of the research that we've done about that. And there's also been a lot of really bad business bills that have been going through. One is House Bill 2386, and that gives the Labor Commissioner the authority to issue cease and desist orders for any small business in the state based on allegations of wrongdoing. Now, luckily, enough business coalitions were able to come together to get it sent back to committee. But that's one of a few really bad business bills that are going on. The Senate President Peter Courtney had a group of chamber folks up the other day, including some from Medford, and he said that they won't be pushing for the minimum wage increase. That being said, paid sick leave is making its way through. And we're also hearing from a lot of business owners, even down there in Medford, who have some concerns about that.
Wow. What about the Department of Forestry bill, HB 2501, talking about private property loss?
So right now, when there's a catastrophic wildfire, the state forester, when they report to the emergency board, which is a group of legislators that allocate funding for emergency purposes, they don't include the loss to private property, which at times can be significant. So you have damage to livestock, damage to timberlands, and things like that. So what this does is this would require them to report that as part of those estimates and would give a more complete portrait. I remember the Biscuit Fire back in 2002. I was living in Talent and reporting in Central Point. I know my in-laws over in O'Brien nearly lost their place. I mean, it almost burned to the ground. So, down in Southern Oregon, you guys are well aware of the risks of catastrophic wildfires and what needs to be done to prevent it. So this is a step in the right direction. If this bill passed the House unanimously and now it heads over to the Senate, where it's in the Energy and Environment Committee, or at least it's been referred there, and we're hoping it'll move through that chamber as well.
All right, so you're saying if private property is listed on the damage, does that mean that they would be paid something for the damage?
That just gives you a better assessment of what the damages look like, because a lot of the damages to private land, it's because the land is adjacent to federal land or state-controlled lands where the fires originate. And that's a huge issue, especially down there in Southern Oregon. So this will give state officials a more complete portrait and probably a better sense of urgency of, my gosh, these fires are a lot worse than we thought, because right now they're not getting the full story.
All right, I only got about 2 minutes left. House Bill 2497. Now this comes from our own local Sal Esquivel, requiring state natural resource agencies to notify the legislators of administrative rule hearings. Wow. Why isn't that happening?
Right. Well, this was based on something that had happened in Klamath Falls a few months ago over the summer, where there's drought conditions going on. The Water Resources Department was going to take some administrative actions, except they didn't tell anybody. And we'd found out about it and contacted the local officials and the local press and everybody else. My boss, Senator Whitsitt, had asked the state archivist, so how many administrative rules are there? And she didn't know. Offhand, did not know how many administrative rules there are. And she'd come up with this kind of formula to calculate it, and we'd averaged it out over time. There is an administrative rule passed every 15 minutes in this state. Whoa. And imagine trying to keep up with that as a small business owner. So what this does is if there's an administrative rule being proposed that's specific to a geographic area, then that agency just has to let the representative and senator for that area know about it. So it's a very common sense bill, and we're hoping that makes its way through the process.
I remember when the proposed legislative administrative rule bill, oversight bill came up, just was common sense, and it was voted down. And here's a classic example of why you want to have it back. Yeah.
Well, exactly, especially since we have a part-time legislature, and they meet for 6 months every couple of years, and then the second they leave the building, the agencies kind of go back to doing whatever they want again.
Yeah.
So,
hey, Scott, got to go. Thank you, my friend. Keep up the good work. Give our best to your boss. Tell him thanks for his service, and all you guys up there. Keep up the fight, buddy.
All right. Thank you, Perry.
All right. Good to see you, Scott. All right. We'll see you next time on Focus Today.